All right, just as we get ready for our roll call, welcome to everybody, and especially to John and Stephen at their first official full-length meeting. So welcome. And if we could do roll call, please.
Yep, just 1 second. Everybody want to change their mics to red. So just press the button. Okay, sorry about that.
You gotta hold it.
We're just getting mics set up. Okay, so Chair Tripp.
Present.
Scott Broom.
Present.
Glenn Campbell.
Present.
Angela Fields. Present. Jason Legree.
Present.
Lisa McGee.
Like once it starts running red,
We are present, just for the record. Connie Talbert. Present. John Proctor.
Present.
Present.
And just for the record, what we're going to do is, as John, I'll finish this off actually. Stephen Parker.
Present.
Chair Tripp, we do have quorum. However, before we move forward, I do want to get confirmation from both of our community representatives that they have completed the training. So I'm going to pass it back to John to start.
Okay. I can confirm with certainty that I have completed the mandatory training required under the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019, and that I am unaware of any reason why I should be ineligible to sit as a voting member of the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board.
Okay, and on to you, Stephen.
I can confirm with certainty that I have completed the mandatory training required under the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019, and that I am unaware of any reason why I would be ineligible to sit as a voting member of the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board.
That's great. And so just so that we have on record, we do have our board members all now present and accounted for, and with the mandatory training complete. At this point, the board is just waiting for confirmation on the provincial appointees, which will be assigned by the province. And we are expecting that, I would say, kind of mid to late fall.
Correct. Thank you. Land acknowledgement, just as we start into the meeting. As we gather, we would like to acknowledge on behalf of the board and our community that we are meeting at the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We'd like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history, and we're extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. And moving on to agenda item 2, declaration of conflict of interest, pecuniary interests. Seeing none, thank you. We have no presentations and delegations at this meeting, so moving past 3. We do have a representative from OPP who we will be we'll be hearing from in the report. Dawn could not make it today. She is ill and texted me early this morning that with her regrets, but that Steve Bosa would be here in her place, but he's also well known to the board and will be a very familiar face as we go forward. So thank you and welcome for coming and for stepping in. Agenda item 4, approval of the minutes which were attached to the package that was sent out. If I could have moved, Connie, seconded, Scott. Thank you. All in favor? Perfect. Thank you. Carried. Items of business. There weren't any coming out of the minutes. I think as we move into the different reports, we'll have other items coming up. The one thing that I did want to mention is that Jason Legree at the last meeting had put forward a notice of motion for the OPP to come forward with a full, rather robust description of our funding and the grants and things that are operating. In light of discoveries during the conference and issues around insurance, we feel it is prudent to wait and have those discussions at our August meeting, and we'll discuss more of that in the chair's report. So to that point, and I've reached out to Jason pre the meeting to inform him, so it wouldn't be a surprise, but I think it serves all of us in terms of our due diligence and our protection that we wait for those comprehensive in-depth briefings. That said, I am aware through the transition of the operations of the grants and the structure and how they're operating at a very high level, and there's nothing in there that is of immediate concern, or I would have brought it to this table now. I think it's prudent for us to wait until August for a full briefing. So with that, we'll move into the reports. And we have three. We have the update, and in that update, I'll talk about the conference that we attended. And then we'll move into Zone 2 meetings, which Scott will talk to, and then the detachment commander's update through Steve. So with mine, and I apologize in advance because this is going to be a rather narrative meeting. Going forward, there will be much more engagement from the table as opposed to just the chair, but given the unusual circumstances we're in during this transitional period, I think it's appropriate just to share what we've learned to date, and then we land on some consensus decisions on our steps forward. So to start with the conference update, and copies of my notes will be provided to the clerk to attach to the minutes if you wish to go back and review. And we have a very small presentation that I've plagiarized from the officials at the conference, who I started to try making it look good, and I thought, no, it's easier just to take their name off and put mine on it. So untrue for the minutes. So the update, it was really well attended. There were most of the police service boards, detachment boards, whatever the terminology is, were represented at the meeting, a blend of both municipal and OPP boards. So there were a number of preliminary sessions that would apply to both boards, and then we broke out on day 2 and 3 into meetings and sessions specific to whether you were a municipal board or an OPP board. The biggest takeaway from this meeting is we are all facing the shared concerns, observations, challenges. We are not alone in this transition period. Even the government, through departments like Treasury Board and the Solicitor General's Department, recognize the implementation challenges and unintended consequences of moving the legislation through so quickly. There's a collaborative move to work towards solutions, and I'll speak in that in a minute, but things are moving forward at a pace that I'm quite excited about. The attendance, it was by board members, also staff, and in some cases the OPP detachment commander or his or her representative attended. And that worked out well as a model because the entire team was there to discuss. There were a lot of boards in our position where it was just the chair because they were new and getting formed. But the suggestion going forward is it's a more robust delegation that captures all sides of our relationship, both in terms of the OPP as well as the staff, and then us as the board. The association, the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards, has been around for quite some time. Lisa Darling, who is the CEO, Executive Director, is a retired OPP detachment commander, incredibly well informed and doing a really good job at stewardship of the legislation through, and providing resources to us as we get a little further down the line in terms of, and we'll hear about this in a minute, budgeting, policies and procedures, all the infrastructure that we're going to need, and the tools that we're going to need to fulfill our mandate will be available. Best practices from other detachments, as well as what they're receiving from the ministry. The minister attended virtually. The Inspector General and his entire team, Inspectorate General and his entire team were present on the floor and were really helpful and informative on what their role is and the flexibility during this transition period. So things like reporting, for example, which we have a mandate under the legislation to do in June, is rather flexible in our first year. They recognize that it would be not a good use of resources to do a fulsome report when we only have, in some cases, boards have not met. In others, they've acted as we have, a few informative meetings to kind of get their feet in the ground. but the expense time of doing a report is just not justified. They were impressed with our approach to do a letter, and then an interim report in the fall, and then a full report in June, and then we're back onto that annual cycle. OPP were there. They were talking as well as about the relationship, and reporting came up. OPP at a provincial level is looking at working towards a standardized reporting formula that detachments could use, so the message throughout the province coming to the boards is the same type of data. There's flexibility to adjust it to our specific needs, but strong sense of collaboration. And again, we're all working through the issues of implementation. The elephant in the room, insurance. Everybody expressed concern. There was concern raised by the Inspector General as well as by the Ministry that this was an oversight. Detachment boards do not fall under the definition of a local board as provided for in the Municipal Act. And that's the crutch of why we don't have eligibility for insurance. We are not, and we'll need to make adjustments in terms of how we meet, because under the Police Service Act, we are representing the municipalities and have been appointed by our respective municipalities to have a voice on the board, but we are sitting here as board members. So when we get in our cars to leave our residence and come to this meeting, we are coming as board members, not councillors. We have no, we don't fall under the Municipal Act. We are around the table equal. So provincial appointees are board members. Our community appointees are board members. We are all board members, and it's a flat, consistent organization. We are there to send information back, as well as to come into our respective areas, but also as a collective group to come to consensus on what is best served in terms of the priorities and needs for the community as a whole. So as a parallel, when we sit on council, we represent our wards, but the decision of council is a consensus decision for council. It's very similar to this at a board level. So that was a big discussion around the insurance, and people started to migrate towards the understanding. There are no current products available. The ministry had looked at doing something, and they couldn't. It's not within their mandate. The association has worked now with the ministry and other sectors of the province to reach out to 3 or 4 large insurance companies and indicate that this is a priority. And it's quite honestly something we didn't anticipate when we rolled out the legislation. Unintended consequence. Can't look in the rearview mirror. We just need to fix what we have going forward. Speaking to Lisa yesterday, they have been having discussions with 3 or 4 large companies who will put together an insurance package specifically for OPP detachment boards in Ontario. They will be sold through local brokers, with the intent being that we as a community board can get a local insurance broker or someone knows our catchment area, and they would shop us to one of the 3 firms for the best deal. So we have a choice of firms to go to, and we have a choice of who we wish to bring on as our insurance broker. They're doing the risk analysis now and trying to come up with an idea of what the insurance will cost. They're anticipating, but not committed to, around a $5,000 annual per diem, or sorry, fee. But that will be, we're hoping to hear in the next week. Lisa said that it's almost finished. We should hear the first week of July or the second week of July, and then we can purchase for insurance. All boards are going through the exact same thing. Municipal boards, not so much, because they still fall under the legislation. OPP does not. So that's the crux. So we should hear more, and that can go out just as an information email once I get information from Lisa. They're also working with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario as well to provide a little extra not pressure, but reinforce the importance of this and the need for it. So at least encouraging that they're moving quickly. Then we moved in from there into discussions about finance and budgeting, which is really appropriate for us because we're sitting here now as an orphan child. Up until April 1st, the town of Renfrew and Adams of Bromley were involved in the board, and it really met that catchment area. And now that we've switched to a larger catchment area and 7 municipalities that will be expected to provide input into the budget, financial input into the cost, we need to move forward quickly with an interim budget that will carry us until December, and then a secondary budget, which would be an annual budget going forward from December 25 for the fiscal period. There is no interim funding in play, and I'll speak more to the budget in a moment in terms of what goes into it. But that led us to the conversation that we have no money. So how do we pay for insurance? How do we get the budget up and running? We need procedures and policies. There's a number of things that we need to get into play. So there was a discussion with the province, with the minister, and with the inspector general, who has no skin in the game, but is also empathetic and has a very strong voice. The Ontario Association asked for funding that they could transfer down to each of the boards for implementation. Treasury Board is bound not to fund associations by part of their mandate. And it goes across all, not just, so their hands are tied. That led to the discussion of the SolGen approaching Treasury Board and asking for an envelope of money to help implement or help with the transition of the implementation of this legislation. They have that authority to provide the money to SolGen. SolGen would then provide it to the Ontario Association. They would then look at our draft budgets and hopefully provide back funding to offset the expenses between now and December. Those are conversations. It's not a fait accompli, but it's looking quite promising. The head of the association has a very good relationship with the minister, and we'll be having those conversations, as well as gathering support from local MPPs across the province. So there's been a lot of progress, all very confidently, very quietly, considering the insurance implications, and on the desk of the Ontario Association of Police Service Boards, which has the coverage to provide to its members these services. Can we go up to the presentation, up to the slide deck, please? Next slide. Sorry, next one too. So this is about the budgets. And we require the estimate, as I said, because we do need to get money coming in to pay for some of the costs. In one of the discussions on the policies and procedures and documentation, we landed on a discussion of the terms of reference. Terms of reference need to include all of our information about budgeting so that it is reflected in the terms to hold municipalities accountable to paying their fee. And we'll talk about this in a minute again at high level, but we need that to go into our terms of reference. If you recall, we postponed our terms of reference at the last board. We'll get to the budget, we'll then roll the terms of reference in. They talked about who's responsible and what does it include. So it's the responsibility of our board to build the budget. But there's also a strong commitment on our part to work with our 7 municipalities as we build it, because they're ultimately going to have to sign off on it and provide payment, both on the interim and on the longer term one. And I think it behooves us to be very much coordinated in those discussions as we start to move forward. In terms of what's in the budget, and this was just a high-level discussion on the floor to help us shape some of our thinking, is the operational budget is twofold. First and foremost, it is to our operations, the things that we're going to need as a corporation or as an institution or as a board to move forward. The second is the cost of per diems after we have that discussion and figure how we're going to land on it. But the two items are separate. They combine to the total cost of running this board, but the budget is really our operational and administrative expenses. And then a second paragraph to that, or a schedule to the budget, would be the anticipated fees for per diems. We have association fees. We pay into Zone 2, which I think is $100 a year. It's insignificant. But the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards is an expense, well, not expensive, it's a couple of $1,000s for the annual membership. Insurance fees, because we'll be managing our own funding, should we go that path? I mean, it's part of our policy and discussion, but if we're thinking of that, we're going to need to look at having accounting fees brought forward and audit functions. And again, that's in line with our transparency to the community and to our municipalities to be able to provide statements at each AGM on where the money came from and where it went, because we're also accountable to the community. Community consultations on the local action plan, that's something we're mandated to do. Most boards contract that out. There's a plethora of really good organizations that have been supporting boards in the past. Also, costings for planning meetings on policies and procedures. Every time we have a meeting, it will cost us money. So we need to figure out how many meetings we're going to have and what those costs are. Split between the per diems, but also just the travel costs in terms of mileage, if we do need meeting space. And we do have some per diems that are mandated in the legislation. Annual reporting, same thing. We are accountable to do a strategic plan. Again, there are companies, they're not expensive, but they have the experience in doing them for OPP detachment boards. So they have the narrative to make sure it lands in line with the OPP board. One of our mandates is to do the performance appraisal of the detachment commander. Again, there's a cost of the meetings around that. But also one of the really interesting takeaways was a survey that's being done within detachments. The model, there was talk about the OPP detachments, but the one that was really interesting was the Calgary Police came to talk about their surveys of the community, the members, and their board. It's done by an outside company. They have a 51% return on the surveys, which is high for those of us who've done surveys. And what they found is if it's done through an independent body and the data is collated in such a way that it can't be identifiable, they had a really strong and positive response from the officers on the ground. If it comes through the OPP, through the detachment commander, they will tell you what you want to hear. If it's coming through a different source, they got really solid. That helped the detachment commander. It helped in terms of the evaluation of the detachment commander because it's almost a mini 360 audit. And it helped the community because we will be coming to the table, you know, with our concerns on road safety and speeding. And it would be interesting to see what the rank and file are saying about that in terms of priorities. So it gives us really valuable information. All this to say those surveys cost money, so we need to have that consideration about putting it into the budget and having the supporting rationale and policy measures for it. We'll need a website, both to be designed and built. There are really strong websites out there that I think we can borrow bits and pieces of. But again, it's not a lot of money, but we need to have it in the budget so that we can move forward with it. Board staff support, an awful lot as they go forward are planning on hiring an individual, an executive secretary or an administrator. Most are landing on $30 an hour and 2.5 days a week. So it would, you know, and it's not for now because we have the wonderful support. And as much as we've been trying to say, quit your day job and come and work for us, we're not getting the uptake I was hoping for. But realistically, sooner than later, Renfrew will say, you need to stand on your own, and we want to be prepared for that and not be caught off guard. Not in the next few months, certainly not before Christmas. Only way out's in a box. But again, it's something we need to think about in the budgeting process. Then to, as I mentioned, board member expenses, there was a lot of discussion on that because again, does anybody here get mileage for coming to the meetings? Yeah, so, and that's a legitimate expense because you're representing, in our municipal hat, we're representing the municipality. The reality is we're coming, when you leave your home, you're coming here on board business, not municipal business, because even our name tags will be changing for the next meeting because we're not councillors sitting at this table, we're board members. So those mileage claims would be a responsibility of the board to pay. Realistically, it's all being transferred back to the municipality, but our expense as operating a board would fall to the board and has to go into the budget. So as we disperse that across the municipalities, it's included. So it's a complex system to work through. So that's the update on the meeting. I'll break there for a second, and sorry, it's been a narrative and a fire hose, but transitional. But high level, it was a good meeting. It was worth the expense. Meetings, so my cost to attend was close to $2,000. The fee was $850 for the meeting. There was travel because it was on the other side of the province, and there was 1, 2, 3 nights of accommodations. Meals were covered and so on and so forth. So let's assume going forward next year, we have, the chair, a board member, a community member at large, and OPP there. OPP would cover their own costs, but it would be an $8,000 to $10,000 cost to attend. So it's not insignificant, and these are the discussions that help us go into. Next meeting is in Ottawa, so it will be significantly easier. Accommodations is questionable, mileage is insignificant. It's just the $800 fee per person. But the return on investment certainly for this meeting is strong, and I'm hearing that all the meetings are like that. 2 more things. In terms of current operations, obviously as a board we're not doing anything. We are aware that we still have programs running in the community that are still in that transitional program, and once insurance is in our place, will move over to us. But the connection centers, so we've been meeting with them as needed, just to make sure their wheels stay on the wagon. The funding opportunities for the connection or the crisis unit is a 3-year cyclical grant, around $670,000. It expires shortly, and the new call for proposals for funding came out and was due yesterday. So with the board's permission, I had to make an executive decision and sign the application for it to go in, so we don't miss that opportunity. Nothing will happen until September or October in terms of the review and the acknowledgement and the potential funding, but we couldn't lose getting into the cycle and losing that continuous 3-year funding, which is so important in terms of the connection center in our now catchment area, because it's not just in Renfrew. We're dealing with cases throughout all of our 7 municipalities. So assuming we get the grant, by the time that rolls in, we'll have our own account, our own structure, and it will fall under our governance. Just did not want to lose that opportunity to get it in the mailbox. So meetings, since our last meeting, continue a number of meetings with Dawn just to stay in touch and get feedback on some of the things during the conference, with Scott quite a bit on a sounding board, high-level ideas, and Zone 2, which he'll speak to in a minute. Jeff Scott is still in the picture, but in a very minor role and very collaborative. When he gets emails, he bounces them to me and ensures that the sender knows that the board has changed and with our contacts. And he has been helpful anytime we've had questions or queries. But his role is certainly diminishing with each week, but he has indicated his commitment to making this board happen, and anything he can do in terms of answering questions or making sure that information that goes to him through his old role comes over to us. So I'm happy with that. We went to the Zone 2 meeting, which Scott will talk about. And then I mentioned the notice of motion that we were going to delay that just based on everything until our meeting in August. So there's two last things, and this is going to come with motions or a suggestion for a motion. The name of how we call ourselves was also discussed on the floor at the conference, because again, the change has put a lot of boards into that confusion. Lambton has also inherited new municipalities, and they're called the Lambton and Group, OPP. I have floated to Dawn the suggestion that we look at Renfrew and area. We need Renfrew because it's the Renfrew Detachment. So Renfrew and area OPP Detachment Board, full stop. Simple, quick, easy. What the other websites are doing is we'll have, like in Lambton, they'll go Lambton Man Group, OPP Detachment Board, and then on the website, there's a banner on the side which has each of their municipalities highlighted, so that when they see group, there's a visual right away that it's the 7 of us. Then there's the listing of the boards. So it would be Jason Legree, board member, full stop. And then a little piece over on the side saying municipal representative, not where you're from, just municipal. And then for Stephen and John, board member, their name, board member, and then community appointee. And then on that board is all the OPP reports, our minutes, all of the activity, but the name really captures it. So any discussion on the thoughts of Renfrew and area OPP Detachment Board? If not, could I suggest a motion that the Renfrew OPP Police Services Board adopts the new name as the Renfrew and Area OPP Detachment Board? Scott, seconder. Jason? Discussion? All in favor? Carried. And then lastly is all of the discussion around the budgeting and the requirement and the moving of the finances and unpacking the grants, and all of that stuff is of little risk because it is preparatory. We're not making decisions, we're putting in place policy. Again, in discussion with a lot of the other boards, there's a strong interest in forming a small finance committee of the board to spend some time unpacking all of this, coming up with a very draft budget to bring back to this table through the committee on a draft budget, but also start to work with the mechanics of, once insurance is in, getting the bank account set up, working with the town of Renfrew to do a review of the current grants, monies provided to Renfrew, monies expensed, what's left in the accounts to move back over. I think it's too big of a job for an entire board. So I would like to suggest, or to the floor, that we have 2 board members and the chair. I'm only suggesting, so I'm open to any comments. I'd suggest 1 board member and 1 community member would be on it, just for the different look. Once we land on a budget, important point I forgot to make, in our relationship with the municipalities, we'll need to be open and communicative of where we're going. They have to approve the budget. So we're not going to come up with something that won't be approved, but we have to be realistic of what our mandated legislated requirements are. Outside of the Municipal Act, we have a responsibility to the Sol Gen, and we will be held accountable by the Inspector General. Not so much in the first year, but in future years, if we don't maintain our mandate, they will come in and give us direction. So with that, we need to come up with a budget that's realistic. We send it to the municipalities. Can I get the next slide up, please? So this was a breakdown of it. Once we land on it and we go to the municipalities, what most boards are starting to do is looking at the model that the OPP uses for funding within the catchment area and apply those same formulas to our budget. So if our budget is 60,000 and we've got, this was just showing 3 municipalities, that budget is broken down through the OPP formula on a variety of calculations. So each of us at our municipal tables pay into the OPP, Renfrew paying more than and Arnprior, I'm assuming, more than we would at our municipality or through Horton. So the same formula would apply to this. So we need to land on consensus. The legislation suggests a shared across the board, which is not appropriate in our case. They have a caveat for the ability to be flexible and come up with a plan that meets all. If we can't land on consensus, by default, it automatically goes to the Inspector General, and they quickly will direct to the municipalities what they will pay. So it takes the negotiation, it takes our input out. It's pretty serious. So there's got to be a really strong collaboration, and I think there will be as we move forward and inform our respective municipalities on where we're going. But first step, we need a finance committee to get that up and running. So the suggestion was that we establish that the Renfrew and Area OPP Detachment Board establishes a finance committee comprised of the chair and 2 board members, one consisting of a community member and one consisting of a municipal representative. Mover Jason, second Scott, and open for discussion, thoughts, amendments. Okay, that being said, do I have to close that, or can we ask for nominees now?
I've closed that.
Okay. All right, so carried. Carried, thank you. And then interested individuals from municipality. Jason? Others? Going once? Going twice? Back up?
Nobody else wants to, right?
Well, Jason's on, so it's,
Okay.
We can vote. So, based on the structure that you just provided, we would want the chair, which
Correct.
yourself, municipal representative. So Jason has put his name on the floor. If anybody else would like to put their name on the floor, we can have a vote on it. If seeing none, we would carry Jason, and then community representative. So if one of you gentlemen like to put your name on the floor, or both. So John, if that is the desired, then we would basically adopt the 2 of those, or the 3 of you as the appointees.
okay, thank you.
And then I would bring forward a bylaw to the next meeting.
We technically can't do bylaws. We're not a municipal body.
You can still do an appointing bylaw within the
Act?
act.
See,
Okay.
that's funny, they told us.
We were
Okay,
told no.
then
Yeah.
never mind.
We'll get in.
I will put my municipal hat away, and I will just note it for the record that the 3 of you have been appointed.
Perfect. If it's on the record for the 3, and we'll work the governance out again as we get a little further into this, but
We just have a mover in a second, then.
yeah, so we'll need someone to move it. Lisa and Connie. Carried. Thank you.
Congratulations, good luck.
So my very last point, and mindful of time, the legislation mandates, just to give you a flavor of how concerning this is for other OPP boards, the legislation mandates that we have as a minimum 4 meetings a year. And the Inspector General had to go up into the very northern part of Ontario to meet with a very small OPP detachment and explained to them the process. And they used very colorful language to direct them to go somewhere on their own. And the chair of the board very clearly stated, we will meet the conditions. We're having our first meeting on Saturday at 9 a.m. to 10. Our second will be 11 to 12, and then 1 to 2, and then 2 to 3 will be done, off, and we will see you next year. Which was kind of interesting for them to realize, there's some groups that are really engaged and others that need the flexibility based on their geographic representation and their infrastructure and their accounting. So that flexibility is being shown by the Inspector General in the interim, but also very clear once we're up and running, we've had some time under our belt, we'll be held accountable to the mandate of the legislation and what our clear mandate is to do in terms of that. So with that, I'll hand the floor over 6.2 to Scott on updates from the Zone 2 meeting.
All right. Thank you, Chair. And through you, Friday was a very short but very informative meeting. We got to do a lot of interacting with all different levels, municipal boards, OPP boards, and then Belleville actually, who hosted it, is going to be a test guinea pig for a lot of different policing. Like they said, policing of 2024, 2025 is much different than even 3 years ago. Mental health is taking such a draw on policing that they found themselves, they had to, I believe it was last summer, they had to call a state of emergency due to fentanyl. They were the first drop-off point, and they had 16 people drop of fentanyl overdose in 5 minutes. So, yeah, they just went over their facility would be any police officer's dream. There's 3 forensic labs in there. Yeah, it's just tremendous. But I just wanted to say the next meeting is actually in Pembroke, not in Ottawa.
No, sorry, the Ontario Association of Police Services Board.
Yes,
The big
okay.
one is in Ottawa.
Yes. But the next
Zone 2?
zone meeting is September 19th and 20th. And if you can attend, I strongly recommend it. Just the, actually, Dr. Brown, which served 32 years on the Ottawa Detachment. He's going to be doing a forensic breakdown on the Cecil Barutsky triple homicide. And the 20th is actually a member of the MPs coming down from Madawaska Garrison and give a level of how they're doing policing on the military side. So it's gonna, it sounds very informative. We did have kind of a, the changeover of chair, vice chair, excuse me, all changed. And the new chair of the zone is actually Diane from Lanark. So we have a local representation, which is excellent. A lot of it was talked about the changing in policing and the different support things that are needed for police officers. Belleville actually brought in a chaplain, and everybody went, really? And they said he's actually married 3 of their officers now. he's a go-to person for the members to just go sit in his office, and if they're having a hard time or need to, he wasn't, the acting chief wasn't too sure how it would go, but he said it's been a godsend for his members. And he said he just comes in a couple days a week, or with one phone call, he'll be at the detachment. He has his own little office there, and he said they love it. Diane's the chair. Yeah, there was representation there from pretty much every municipal board and OPP board in our region. So, we talked on budgets, and there was actually one board's already got their budget passed. And we're like, you did that without insurance? But anyways, it seems like everybody's going from the $10,000 to $7,000 area for this year. And then, and those are boards our size. But again, that's, we don't know how much money they had in the bank. That was just discussion. Another big one was body cams. The chief himself said, he was a little leery whenever they come in because he figured it was it was intruding on their personal, but he said now they swear by it. And they do have 3 psychologists that one's always in the detachment, one's out in a car, and the other one's always obviously off. And the scenario he gave was a young girl jumper off a bridge. The officer that was there had his cam going. The lady knew who she was, knew her triggers, and how to talk her down. Before the lady in the cruiser could get to the bridge, that officer talked her off the bridge and into his car. And all done by live body cams. So it's, it just stuff like this that came up. Like I say, it was an amazing, it was a short meeting. It was for about 4 hours, but the information just flowed the whole time. Belleville, in comparison, is 50,000 residents. They have 98 sworn officers. And here is what the kicker is: 76 civilian auxiliary members. So there's pretty much two people in every car. An auxiliary goes out with the officers. And I think he said once or twice a month they have community engagement. They'll put on like a car wash at the police station. Drive in, drive out. The fire department's there, and they raise money for like their mental health stuff that the government won't cover. And this is how they're helping fund themselves, is by having a fun little car wash. And he said all the members come out. It's great. They love it. You're getting interaction with the community. And the way he said it is, it's going back to the old time policing of a lot of, just a lot of interaction between our residents. Lisa?
I'm just curious, I have a question on that. Would you rather I wait until the end? Or?
Yeah, I'm just about done. And
Okay, I'll wait.
the whole inspector group was there, and each one took a little synopsis. I have all the slides on my phone. What I'll do is probably either put them into a slideshow, or I'll put them up on YouTube and just send the link to Rob, and if you want to send it out. You can read over all the different things, what they do for the officers, the mental health, the support that they give their officers. They have a gym second to none, and most of it's put there by the officers. But again, they're short, and I don't know how many times it came up. The electorate said it, and pretty much every high-level OPP person that was there was a commander, a couple staff sergeants, they all said that they can't even get close to their numbers. Ottawa's sitting at, I believe, 60% right now. And we're a little bit higher than that, but, you know, they cannot get the kids, or they can't draw people because of what all the kids are seeing on social media with policing. And as for one, I can speak. My son is in his last year. He's got one more semester left. And Municipal is out. He's going military because you don't have there's no military individual that's going to throw a phone in an MP's face, because that phone will probably end up over there. You know, it's just two different ways of policing. And there is an app for the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards. So if you want to write that one down, just go into your app search for OAPSB, and there's information on there as well. So it's really good. Mental health is a huge draw in policing. They touched a little bit on just networking with a few people with the per diems, and you know, every board has different ideas. So with the 4 mandatory meetings, you touched on that, Rob. Pembroke is September 19th and 20th, and like I said, if you can get to either one, it's going to be an amazing. Dr. Brown, I got to talk to him while we were eating lunch, and what an informative man. Like, started out just as a, you know, don't take this wrong, not just as a police officer, but he moved up through the ranks, and then now he teaches forensics at Ottawa U, and he's got his doctorate, and just a wealth of knowledge. And he'll be doing the whole 19th, and then 20th, we're not too sure. It'll be all about the military policing side, and that's about it. And like I said, there was a lot of networking opportunities at our table. There was Clareton was there, Rob, myself, Belleville. It was, it was great to see so many people interactive and trying to get to the same thing. But again, we must have saw on the slide, there's a great big slide, insurance for detachment boards, recommending stay away, have no meetings until there's insurance.
There is, if I can just
Yeah, absolutely.
bring us into closure on this. On the OASP app, when you're going into it, we have a membership, but it's under the town of Renfrew. Renfrew Police, I think it's called. But When you scroll down and it asks where you're from, just
Yeah.
go to anything that says Renfrew and that'll click you in. It needs to be updated. The membership is paid up until December 31st. They recognize because we're a different board, they've allowed us access under that window. So not just the slideshows from Zone 2, but all of the slide presentations from the conference will be posted either by the end of this week or next week. They're having some capacity issues. And Lisa, you had a question for the floor?
Thank you. I now actually have two. You mentioned, I just want to make sure that we do have continuity of some insurance until we resolve the group insurance, because your last point was that there was an emphasis on no meetings until there is insurance.
Correct.
So where are we covered currently, is my
So
question.
right now, the emphasis on no meetings is an emphasis on no meetings where we're making decisions, other than internal administrative decisions, which is why we have poised all conversations around funding, and that our decision today to launch a finance committee has no litigious bearing because we're working internally. We have to be very, very careful as to our dialogue and what we express and what we say, even outside of this room, on inferences to the situations or individuals, because if it's in relation to the business of this table, liability is not tied just to this room. So until we have insurance, we need to be very careful, which is why we're not getting into board meetings where we're moving forward on agendas. We're waiting now. Our next meeting is in August. At that time, we'll have insurance. If we don't, I will propose that we move that out. We don't want to develop policies because we would be legally accountable to a policy if we recommend this is our, we did rules and procedures to allow us to operate. We're not going to do a finance policy. We're not going to do a policy on reporting because we're held accountable.
Okay.
So we can still meet. I suggest unless it's essential, we don't. The only reason we went through with this meeting is to provide an update and to strike a finance committee.
Okay.
But we're very careful of that. I just want to emphasize our communication about our business, where we're going, discussions on anything that's not pertained to just the administration of what we're doing, we should refrain on for the next couple of weeks. And then we can do an email to the board once we have information on insurance, and then we'll find a creative way to pay for it, because we'll want to, and I don't think that will be an issue. So my travel, for example, the township covered my travel, and they'll charge it back to the board, and I think the same is for Scott. So we may be able to just get the insurance picked up, and then once we get the funding in place. But even funding discussions, until we get insurance, we do not want to be going out. We just talking about it, we need to get around the table and get a sketch of what we think we're going to need, but not act on that until we're fully insured. Very delicate line, but we're aware of it. Second question?
That satisfies my line of inquiry. You mentioned car washes and fundraising efforts. I just want to confirm whether or not, just because especially as finance is undertaking their new finance committee is moving forward, has the legislation changed in terms of what can be fundraised for? I'm assuming that the fundraising is going towards some of the supports, the gym and the initiatives. Would that be accurate? And not operations or capital, is that right?
You're thinking municipal. It's
No, I'm thinking
the police themselves. So it would be Belleville that would pass a motion to their police board that they're allowed to create a fundraise, whatever lingo they could use. It's more interaction to get the officers into the public and get public, more interaction between the two.
Pardon me if I wasn't clear, just in terms of any funds that are generated, and I mean, there's a limit to where they can be used, I'm assuming, under the legislation. Is that right?
The legislation does have a provision for fundraising as a board and also for us to contribute to charitable organizations. But again, the fundraising is, sponsoring through the Connection Center if they did a walk a little while ago as a fundraiser. That would be under the auspices of a project which sits under the board. But nothing has happened or gone forward on that at all, and won't until we're fully insured and we can unpack the legislation.
Okay.
But there is, in the discussions on finance, in the budget, one of the budget line items is charitable donations, because the board can make a donation, should they wish, to support a charitable function, and they can undertake charitable functions on projects that are related to community policing.
Okay.
And you had a comment on?
And I'm honestly not sure if we can do car washes, stuff like that. I think there's differences between municipal boards and OPP boards.
Absolutely.
So I think that would be something you have to unpack a little bit further too before we even explore that.
Yeah, just curious.
No, I was just saying that's one of the ways that they're actually creating.
Sure. I just don't want our finance board getting excited that they can get out there and, we're going to finance our OPP and the full detachment board for
I think as
with
a
car washing.
board, as a new board with new legislation, all of these things will have an opportunity in our policies and procedures, again, to protect us as individuals sitting on the board. Our policies and procedures on fundraising, on supporting charitable events, will have to have something we can point to justify our decisions at this table. So that's going to happen over the coming months, but it's, again, nothing, as Scott said, the reason we're not having, board minutes or board meetings is we don't want to get into these events until we, have insurance and have our policies and procedures, because we can't, under the governing body, we can't act unless it falls under the act or under our supporting guidelines and procedures and operational mandates. Otherwise, we can become rogue, and that's very dangerous.
Just one last.
Yeah. And how the top of the electorate, or the highest man and the whole new thing that they've built said, you've got to remember the hardest thing is going to be switching hats. Whenever you leave your door to come to a board meeting, you are not a municipal
Official.
official. You are a police board member. There's two different things. And yes, we were nominated to come here municipally, but he must have said it at least 5 times. You've got to get it through your head that you're a board member whenever you walk out your door to come to the board meeting.
This is called the Police Services Act. Sorry, Police Services Act is what it was. Now it's the Community and Police Services Act, and we represent the community. So we're here as representatives. And as this gets rolling and we get into our action plans, there'll be a venue for us to come forward talking about the priorities that we see within our catchment area. Is that, and then we can't direct OPP services, but we can suggest to the detachment commander, here's what the community is telling us. We want more attention on speeding on long weekends. Do we want, and limited resources? So how do they adjust the resources to fit that, of which is the community? And then vice versa, for us to communicate back to the community when there's frustration, that all of the resources seem to be going into Horton. Well, the reason they're going into Horton is because there's a rash of B&Es, and if they can get in and break that pattern, it'll stop it from transitioning into other areas. So our role is that two-way communication, but first and foremost, we are the community, and we represent our electorates, and the legislation was designed to have people who really understand the community come from the municipal world because they're hearing it from their constituents. So let's create a venue where they sit on the board as board members, but they have an elected background. We need community members who are coming with a different lens, and then political appointees who come in with the lens of this is a provincial piece of legislation. So very flat. And not for today, but at our next meeting, we'll have discussions, once we have insurance, around per diems. Because that's a very, you talked about the budget that they passed at $10,000. A meeting costs us $1,200 to have. If we were doing a per diem right now, every time we meet is $1,200. Every time the finance committee meets is going to be $750. So budgets are complicated. But again, those discussions we don't want to have until we get into per diems. So if I could suggest in the interest of time, are you, sorry, Scott, I'm not.
No, I just, speaking about per diems, there's one that was $250 for the chair, $200 for the vice, and $150 per person. That was the highest I ever heard. And the lowest I heard was 100 chair, 75, and then 50. So it's all over the board, but the majority seems to be about, what, 150, and then 100. That seems to be about the norm, or not the norm, but the average.
Yeah.
But it's, again, there's one, actually our neighbor to the south, they have 20 municipal elected officials, plus their community members, plus the provincial. So they're trying to split it in two, and they're having a hard time because the government doesn't want to split. So he's like, try to have a meeting with that. 20 people.
Yeah. I think this is something we don't get into discussion with here today. Let's wait till the insurance comes in. Because it is a very sensitive topic, and I think it's one that we could be brought to task on. And the Zone 2 meeting is a smaller catchment than the larger meeting in Toronto. There will be materials coming online that will help us get our head around some of this and the rationale between keeping the board equal. But it is a very sensitive and delicate issue, both in terms of perception, in terms of financial cost, to be unpacked later. But I think we need to take our direction from the association as well. And Scott's right. Some are doing zero. Just the community appointees and the provincial appointees, and then others are significant. But it's between a zero and like winning the lottery. So we'll figure that out. With that, let's move on to the detachment commander's update.
I'll try and fill in for Don today. So I'll be very, very brief on everything right now because I know there's concerns about insurance and everything else. So currently, Renfrew Detachment, we're sitting about 63% front line availability, which means takes into account who is able to actually respond to calls at any given moment. I think we have about 7 constable positions currently vacant. 2 were recently created because we had a member transfer to Upper Ottawa Valley, Constable Carswell, and then a member of our emergency response team has now begun full-time, creating a vacancy at a detachment, PC Lad. He's still working in the area, but it's just a reallocation of his designation within detachment. He's now a regional body instead. We've 1 constable away on maternity leave right now. We have 2 sergeant vacancies. Sergeant Corey Briscoe, some of you may know him or knew of him. He has been promoted to staff sergeant of Grenville Detachment, so he's no longer in the area. We have his vacancy, and Sergeant Greg Strang, I don't know if anyone knew him, but he was at Atlantic previously. He's now gone on a 1-year acting assignment within GHQ, developing some peer support programs. So those are 2 vacancies which I've been allowed to advertise for. In addition to our service delivery model, so we're trying to get additional staffing throughout the OPP right now. We've just advertised for 4 actual new sergeants at our detachment. So the competition is open right now. I'm looking for applicants, and we'll see what comes back when the competition closes in about a week. We'll be running a competition, and the best candidates will be selected. Currently, we have 3 constables outside of detachment on acting assignments. One is working provincial FABU, so firearms analyst. So basically, he's firing off guns, making sure that they are a firearm, allowing us to charge for that, or allowing every basically municipality to charge for that. He's an expert when it comes to identifying what a firearm actually is or is not, because there's certain percentage second stuff. One member is on an acting assignment within region, Constable or Acting Sergeant Roberge. She is part of basically the community engagement side of the house, so she's doing a lot of community engagement stuff, not only just in our detachment area, but now regionally. And Detective Constable Bernie Dickey is acting as a detective sergeant in Lanark, just assisting over there right now with that crime unit. So we had just 2 brand new recruits arrive about a month ago. Stephanie Bilsner-Wilson, she lives locally, which is nice. So I think she's going to be setting up roots here. She's currently with her coach officer, which is Ghislaine Brazeau, as well as Matthew Torrance. He's a new probationary constable, just arrived the same month that Stephanie did. They're both doing very well, but we're working actively to get them out in the community so people get to know them. We have another recruit arriving in August. So we are getting a lot of vacancies. We've had a lot of turnover, a lot of change in detachment very, very recently. So the familiar faces that used to be, like Arnprior, you know, the Don Goujones, you know, all the old people who used to be around, it's changed a lot. I try and get out in the community as much as I can. I'm probably a little more well-known than most, but that's, again, I'm born and raised Arnprior. So we're having more officers kind of live in our area, but we're working at more active community engagement. So we do have 3 current grants right now outstanding. So the MCERT grant expired, I believe, the end of this last fiscal. So the application just went in the other day, so we're hoping that's successful. MCERT's definitely very, very valuable for us. It allows us to have a crisis worker with an officer go out to mental health calls, and mental health calls are one of the most common things we deal with on a daily basis. They can take several hours to deal with just 1 call for service, tying up 2 officers at a time. So I'm going quickly through all this stuff. If you have questions, please ask. A mental health call, like an officer would respond, determine if they're a risk to themselves, someone else, or can't care for themselves. They get apprehended, they go to the hospital, and they have to get assessed. And that whole process, once they're assessed, they could go to a hospital, they could not, but that can take anywhere between an hour to 12 hours, I've seen. So it is a massive drain on resources, but we make do with that stuff. So hopefully the MCERT grant's successful, allowing us to have a second crisis worker, so we have coverage 7 days a week. We have the HUB grant, which I think it's in the final year, but it might be a year and a half left of that.
2.5.
2.5? So,
1.5, I think.
So
It's in process.
So they're working on that too. So the hub is basically a central location just across from Scott's Hardware there, where the community can go get resources. They set up programs for youth. They had I think a hockey league this winter. Basically trying to get more community involvement and be a resource for anyone who's in crisis, or say you need housing. They have contacts in Renfrew County Housing. Just trying to allow the community to have more resources for anyone living in our detachment area. It's not just a Renfrew thing. Finally, the Prevent Auto Theft Grant is the biggest one that we're having. We're currently in year 2 of that one. We're still working through a lot of, I guess, challenges with it, because it was right allocated when this stuff was under the CSP or the CSPA, Community Safety and Policing Act, came through, changing the old PSBs to what we have for the OPP Detachment Board. There's lots of moving parts within that grant itself. So we're working through all that stuff as we speak on a daily basis. We do have a community involvement golf tournament actually occurring tomorrow. I think they have anywhere between 130 and 150 participants for it. It's the 9-1 golf tournament. It's a second annual one. All proceeds raised is going to the Arnprior Food Bank this year. Last year it went to the Renfrew Food Bank. So between the 2 food banks, it's a large catchment area of our detachment. So they'll be alternating between those 2. and Constable Brown, Constable Roberge, and I think Constable, I forget the other constable was involved, but they've been coordinating it the last 2 years, and it's been very, very well received, very, very successful. Traffic campaigns, we're about to kick off the Canada Week traffic campaign starting tomorrow. It's going to be focused on Big Four, which is aggressive driving, seatbelt use, impaired operation motor vehicles, as well as distracted driving, so you're utilizing cell phones. Officers are going to be dedicating just time straight to traffic enforcement, not tied up with calls for service. So that's a week-long traffic initiative, and basically you'll see several officers ideally on the highway if they're not tied up with calls for service. And then July 7th to 14th, we have Operation Safe Driver, which is primarily focused on commercial motor vehicle stuff. And if you've seen any of the OPP East Region stuff in the last couple of months, we've been doing trying to target a lot more CMV stuff on 17. We received quite a bit of complaints about speeding of CMVs on 17 between Arnprior and Renfrew. So we brought in MTO enforcement officers. We brought in our highway safety, our time team, which is basically dedicated traffic officers that are regional, as well as officers dedicated from detachment. So we're doing everything we can to combat the issues of speeding, especially when it comes to CMVs and stuff in our areas.
Whatever happened to the traffic enforcement out of Canada? You used to see them up here all the time, and I haven't seen them in years.
No, they're still around. It's just, it's not out of Canada. And so the Ottawa traffic is its own detachment area.
Okay.
So that goes from basically County Road 29 all the way to, I forget, the 416, 417, the other side of Ottawa. So they're a dedicated detachment on their own. Arnprior, or we basically go from County Road 29, or just this side of County Road 29, all the way just north of Cobden is our detachment
I
area.
remember there used to be like 3 or 4 cruisers that go all the way up to Deep River to do that whole.
No, they are still, so that's our time team is what they call it now.
Oh, okay.
So it's Highway Safety Division, or Provincial Traffic Operations is what they're called now. So, and in terms of, like, I know there's going to be further discussions, but all officers do have body cams. We've had that since October 2022. In-car cameras exist in every single cruiser. We have clinicians, all that stuff we do have in the OPP. It's just funded differently than other things. So, unless there's any other questions, I was asked to keep this very high level or other stuff, but please ask away.
I just have one comment on the grants. Through the Connection Center, when we hear of the different activities that are going, it's currently under its existing funding stream, and when that contract was negotiated to provide the funding under the old board, which is where these grants sit, townships needed to provide, or the township needed to provide an insurance certificate for that grant. They did, and that's a condition of the grant being awarded. It still sits under that in a temporary position until such time as we secure our insurance, and then we will send that certificate over and have it transferred under us. But for the interim, just if it kind of peaked up that we're doing, community walks and things, it falls under that. The existing grant, the new grant will fall under us. So that transition's just been provided for under the existing insurance certificate, sitting with the funding. Questions from the floor? Perfect, thank you. Really informative. So agenda item 7 on correspondence, we have none. And under 8, notice of motion, hearing none, we recognize yours is still on the floor and we'll be bringing it forward. And then item 9, bylaws. That the bylaw listed on the agenda of June 20th, 2024 be taken as read and passed, 03-2024, confirming bylaw June 20th. Can I have a mover, please? Scott, second. Glenn? Discussion carried? Carried. Thank you very much. Upcoming meeting. Thankfully, I managed to get the note out, and I appreciate your Flexibility in not arriving with your finest photographic attire today. We will push that to the next meeting. Again, there's just so many moving parts going on right now, but we'll set that up for August, at our next meeting, August 21st. And we're suggesting that we meet at the OPP station in their community boardroom. Is that?
Boardroom, yeah.
Boardroom. And we'll make arrangements at our end to make that happen. And we'll do the photography at that point. And again, if you have time between now and then, and I'll try to send out a few links to the websites that are really interesting. You'll notice most of those with the photography and the logos. It's a nice blend between community and OPP in terms of the photography that's on the websites and telling the story about this being, a Community Police Services Act, and that we are that community lens into the OPP Detachment Board. So email will follow, but our plan will be to do the group shot then. We have no word, as we've talked about, on the provincial appointees, but hopefully we'll hear over the summer on a rough ETA. But I think we go ahead now and then just update the photo or airbrush them in afterwards. Under the category second thought. Roundtable, anybody have anything else before we close down? Perfect. Thank you very much. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 11:23. Thank you very much.